Let's talk about The Festival, which is an independent British comedy directed by Ian Morris, who's one of the creators of The Inbetweeners, and starring Joe Thomas, who is one of the stars of The Inbetweeners. It was shot on location at Leeds Festival last year and is about a young graduate called Nick who is planning to visit the festival with his university girlfriend Caitlin, who's played by Hannah Toynton. But they break up quite cataclysmically on graduation day, and Nick decides that that's his summer is going to be a write-off. He's going to spend the whole time skulking in his bedroom and not have any fun at all. But his friend Shane, who's played by Hamid Animation, he convinces him to go to the festival anyway, because what better way to get over a failed long-term relationship than to be among so many young people having a great time, listening to great music and having a lot of fun. And we have a clip which sets that up quite beautifully.
It will be good to have some good photos of graduation. Put them up when we move in together.
I kind of assumed that we'd, break up.
Time to go mad in the field.
Shane, I'm not coming. When you break up, you can't just carry on like everything's normal. What if I bump into Caitlin?
Oh my God, Nick.
Hello, Caitlin. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks.
How are you?
That's funny. Repeated lines are always funny.
Yeah, I like it.
I mentioned The Inbetweeners in terms of the connection of the director and the star to this material. It's written by Keith Akushi and Joe Parham, who actually were involved with the TV series Siblings. Keith Akushi was the creator of that, and then Joe was a writer, I think, on one of the series. But it does have a very overtly Inbetweeners-like feel, as that joke kind of indicates. And part of the issue here is that, if you think back to the two Inbetweeners films, 2011 and 2014 they came out, all at the end of the summer as well, about now, they made an enormous amount of money. I think between the two of them, it was something like £100 million in the UK alone. These are small, sort of low-budget comedy films, independently produced, and were enormously successful. But the problem with a premise like The Inbetweeners is you can only keep it going for so long, because the cast obviously start to age out of when they could plausibly play the characters. The cast, Joe Thomas is now in his mid-30s, so he can play young very effectively, but he can't necessarily play a school kid anymore. So you can't do another Inbetweeners sequel. Cast members want to move on. But then there's an appetite for that kind of comedy, so you have to find a way to produce something that is Inbetweeners-like, that isn't necessarily part of the Inbetweeners cinematic universe. That's really what the festival is trying to do. It's trying to recapture that comic style, find a way to do it with a slightly older group of characters in a way that's going to be ideally received as enthusiastically as the two Inbetweeners films were. For me, it's not quite as densely packed with jokes as the two Inbetweeners films, particularly the second one I hold in enormously high esteem. I think it's a great teen movie in its own right, a great coming-of-age film. This one is kind of more, let's take a funny situation and try different things out in it. You've got some great supporting characters in there. Claudia O'Doherty, who's this Australian stand-up, plays this festival diehard character called Amy, who befriends the two guys on their way to the festival on the train, and then hangs around with them and has this really she kind of home makes this substance called chaffney, which is this sustaining sort of gloop that she eats. She eats chaffney and only chaffney while she's at the festival, and it gives her all the energy she needs to party, all day long. Right. It looks immensely unappetizing, and she's talking at one stage about getting chaffney sold in supermarkets. Now, Claudia O'Doherty is very, very, very funny, and she's the kind of person where you could say, like, she could just reel off a list of supermarket names and it'd be funny. In this film, she actually does reel off a list of supermarket names, and it's very funny. So, it's cast very well. Jermaine Clements in it as well. He plays Shane's stepfather. And there's a sequence in which he does a 5-point turn in a cul-de-sac. Now, the Inbetweeners humour, what Ian Morris understands as a filmmaker, is that a 5-point turn in a cul-de-sac is intrinsically funny. There's something just that is an amusing idea. And he stages it very, very much in that kind of Inbetweeners style. It's also, the humour in it is very, very class-attuned, but in a modern, like a really super contemporary way. Again, like the Inbetweeners, where you have that slight class split between Nick and Caitlin. Caitlin is obviously quite well off. Her friends are better off still. Joe feels like he's kind of maybe socially not quite on the same level with them and feels anxious around them, whereas Shane is much more working class. And then he meets up with this hen party member played by Emma Rigby, who's dressed as a Smurf, who is completely working class, and they hit it off. And there's this wonderful kind of weird standalone Fantasia style sequence in which Nick kind of imagines what his life might be like with this woman, beyond this kind of their meeting at the festival. And it's this kind of brilliant, hilarious standalone comedy short. So it has great moments in like that. It has some great gross out moments as well, but ones that I feel an Inbetweeners film might have pushed a little bit farther. To me, it feels like it's a film that happens between great ideas. So there's no question The In-Betweeners was just like a kind of a generation-defining comedy idea. I think these people will go on to do something else that is wonderful. This kind of feels almost like they're treading water. They're sticking with what they know, even though they're notionally moving on from it. But as an August comedy, it completely does the job. It passes the 6 laugh test very, very comfortably.